We're talking quarterbacks today. We're going to take a look back at 2021, statistically where the 49ers were, and an over-under series on which players will go over what their statistics were or maybe underproduce versus last season, and the scouting report for the 49ers' very last draft pick, Mr. Irrelevant, Brock Purdy, coming up right now.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker with you at BD Peacock at Eric_Crocker. Thanks for making Locked On 49ers your first listen every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is what we do. Croc, I have to thank you as well for filling in for me last week as I moved. As you can tell, I'm in a new location. I don't like my lighting situation right now. It looks normal to me, but on the screen, I'm coming off a little on the blue side. So I've got to work on that. I've got some sound treatments to do in my little studio here, get the bike that you can see behind me out of here. So we're still work in progress in my new place, but I'm excited. I moved in, I'm back in the Bay, and I'm ready to do this thing.
Congratulations just on the new house. And, it's crazy. My co-host, I guess we've all kind of gone through this over the last couple of years. I have had to go through moving and the transition since joining the podcast. I got my guy, Ryan Tracy. He just sold his home, and I believe he just bought a new house out there in Colorado. And then now you as well, moving from Davis back to the Bay Area. So a lot of movement going on with the guys on the Locked On Network.
A lot of movement, moving up in the world. I'm moving up in property value and price per square foot, but I'm moving down in square footage. So that's been tough, moving a 3-4 bedroom house into now a 2-bedroom house in the Bay, plus office. Though I've got a detached office, which is pretty cool. So I'm looking out the window. I'm in the backyard, and I've got my own little office back here, and I can see the house. I can see my son running around playing. It's pretty cool. But I do want to let folks out there know that this episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season. More props, more odds and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, Croc. Where do we start here on the podcast today? Because we're talking quarterbacks, and we're going to do a series where we go through the 49ers offense and defense, look at what the statistics were last year and which players will exceed what they did statistically last year and produce more, and which players might fall back a little bit. And the quarterback conversation is really interesting, and I think it's pretty obvious in some ways. But first, we got to talk about the 49ers rookie quarterback in Brock Purdy and how he fits in. Will he even make the team? And I know I watched a lot of Brock Purdy tape right after he was drafted. You've done some more work on him recently. And the thing that jumps out to me, and I don't even know what a Kyle Shanahan player is anymore, because I think I know what a Kyle Shanahan running back is, and then they go try to draft a bunch of 220, 230 pound running backs. I think I know what a Kyle Shanahan offensive lineman is, and then they go draft Aaron Banks. I think I know what a Kyle Shanahan quarterback is, thinking Kirk Cousins, and then they go draft, the dual threat guy in Trey Lance. But this would have seemed more like the Kyle Shanahan style quarterback that I would have thought of a couple of years ago. But I don't know what to think about what Kyle Shanahan wants anymore. But the thing that jumped out to me was feet with Brock Purdy.
Yeah, well, before we kind of get into his analysis too, one thing is just like, what is this pick, right? I think a lot of people are assuming that this is a throwaway pick. Obviously, he was Mr. Irrelevant, the last pick in the draft, and he's a quarterback. 49ers just drafted quarterback number 3 overall, traded up a lot of capital to get him. Well, they gave Nate Sudfeld almost $3 million guaranteed. So you assume Sudfeld will, I'd say there's a 98% chance he's on this roster as on the legit active roster, right? Not going to pay him a ton of money and then put him on practice squad. There's still Jimmy Garoppolo. I think the Nate Sudfeld signing lets you know, we expect Jimmy Garoppolo to be off the roster. And they tried to trade him, but it hasn't worked out for, numerous reasons or whatever. Well, the main reason is the injury. So then you go and you get Brock Purdy. And it's like, well, where does he fit in to this whole dynamic? And, you talked about their feet and everything like that. But I'd say right away, the thing that jumped out to me about his game was probably him when he plays in rhythm. That's his strong point, right? If you want to look at what's a legit strength of his, is playing in rhythm with anticipation. And those are some of the things that Kyle Shanahan, when you ask him what is he looking for in a quarterback, that's what he covets, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be the biggest of arms, but a guy that can kind of stand in there. And execute a play call exactly how Kyle Shanahan has it drawn up and thought up in his head and get that ball out right now and make those throws. I think that was the thing that jumped out to me immediately about Brock Purdy's game.
Yeah, and I think with Sudfeld and Purdy, I don't even know if they expect him to make the roster, if they just think they're going to end up stashing him on the practice squad, or if they were trying to add pieces around Trey Lance to say, look, watch this guy every day in practice because he does some of the things that we're trying to get you better at. And even if Brock Purdy doesn't stick, if, footwork, timing, if everybody around you in the quarterback room is doing the thing a certain way, that's going to seep into your brain a little bit. And we've seen it with Jimmy Garoppolo. And a lot of people drew a comparison between Garoppolo and Purdy. And I think there is some of that there. Purdy doesn't have Garoppolo's arm. And a lot of people think that Garoppolo's got a terrible arm. So if you don't like Garoppolo's arm, you're definitely not going to like Brock Purdy's arm, right? But yeah, the timing of it, the anticipation, even that stuff could get better from him. But the thing that jumped out to me was the feet, and everything was just in rhythm, and he was really great with his feet inside the pocket. I don't think he's necessarily going to stick. That's the vibe I got from Brock Purdy. But the 49ers currently have 4 quarterbacks on the roster, and only 2 of them were drafted. One of them is making $25 million. The other one's got some guaranteed money. So at this point, they all have a pretty good stake, like a claim to say, well, I probably, when you look at my resume on paper, I should probably make the roster or be close to making the roster. So this will be interesting if the 49ers end up keeping 3 quarterbacks, if it's just Sudfeld and Lance when the season starts. So that's what might make this more difficult for us to project what the statistical production is going to be for the quarterbacks in 2022.
Yeah, it is going to be difficult, but I think back to kind of Brock Purdy and some of the things you talked about, the arm strength, that's definitely not his strong point, right? Like I think he has to kind of play in rhythm, and I actually saw him more than I was expecting try to make the off scripted plays, and he can move around well, but he's not like this dynamic player. And when you think about guys that are kind of just drafted a little bit higher for whatever reasons, then you start talking about upside, which it kind of gets annoying a little bit because I think people lean on that a little bit too much. But you can see some of the off-scripted stuff and him be able to kind of make some plays on the move. But again, that's not his strength. He's not like this dynamic runner, even though they did some of that with him. Again, not the biggest of arm, but when he plays in time and rhythm, it looks good. One thing, kind of one of my last notes on him, he talked about Jimmy Garoppolo and some of the similarities. I think the biggest similarity to me was their ability to kind of make these off-platform throws with their feet kind of like not having to be perfect, right? Like they have good like movement with their feet in the pocket, but then like Brock can have his feet kind of like, okay, kind of almost gets to a standstill and still be able to snap the ball off real quick and deliver an accurate ball. That was one thing that I thought was kind of pretty cool. And I'm like, am I watching Jimmy Garoppolo right now?
Yeah, the quickness of the release with so sometimes, because I talked about his feet are good, but sometimes even when he's not lined up, like he'll have to move off his pocket movement is good. So he'll move off his spot and then his feet will be facing the sideline, but then he'll throw it like this and just kind of get it out quickly. And so maybe it's not all lined up and perfect, but it's always moving. Like his feet are just really quick.
I watched a video, and I'll just never forget this, from Tom Brady, and he talked about step 2 follow through and kind of like stepping towards where you're throwing with your shoulder kind of pointing in that direction and then like delivering the ball. And you see Purdy where, when he like is able to do that, he does it. But when he's like, oh, I'm just in this position where I can't do that, he's still able to snap off and deliver an accurate ball in intermediate passes. And again, I think that is something that he can lean on to where probably like kind of like a Nick Mullins type guy, right? And remember Nick Mullins, that was Scangarillo's guy, right? So we kind of seen the pattern of who Scangarillo was underneath and kind of some of the guys he likes. I bet you if you ask Scangarillo right now, he'd be like, oh yeah, I like Brock Purdy way more than Trey Lance because Trey Lance is just a lot different than this guy.
Yeah,
but he brings a totally different dynamic in the sense of just playmaking ability and kind of splash plays. It's hard to explain, but Brock Purdy, overall, I saw him as someone where I'm like, okay, like you said, feels like a Kyle Shanahan guy.
Yeah, Purdy's more of a Scangarello guy than he's even a Kyle Shanahan guy. So, right. Brock Purdy, 6'1", 212 pounds. He had 9 1/4 inch hands, so right in the Alex Smith territory. 4.84 40-yard dash, 27 vertical, 7.213 cone, 4.45 in the 20-yard shuttle. So very pedestrian testing numbers. 4.84 is actually not that bad for Brock Purdy. You talked about him making some off-schedule plays. He can scoot around a little bit. He's not like going to go, get a bunch of rushing yards for you, but he can move around a little bit, especially in a short area, which I liked.
Right.
Statistically, real quick, go over a couple of things here. He was a second team All Big 12 in 2021. He was fourth in FBS, completing 71.7% of his passes. He had 19 touchdowns to 8 interceptions and 1 rushing touchdown in 13 starts. So even his passing numbers, I thought were going to be bigger, but they ended up not being as crazy. But when you look at all the games he played during his college career, 12,000 passing yards in college, and second team academic All-American honors as well. He's played for a long time. He won the job. He could have gone to a different college. He could have gone to, I think he was recruited at Alabama, right? He was Arizona Gatorade Player of the Year coming out of high school, and he ended up at Iowa State, and he wanted to turn around that program. And they did some pretty nice things with Brock Purdy. So we elevated a program, which is good. So I'm not going to say he can't stick, but it's going to be tough. And I'm not big on keeping 3 quarterbacks, but if the 49ers move on from Jimmy, as we all expect, maybe they will keep a third quarterback in Brock Purdy on the roster with a lot of the money they have and, resources wrapped up in the other 2 quarterbacks that are almost guaranteed to make the roster at this point.
You talked about him being the Scangarello guy, man, and that's one of his prerequisites for being a quarterback for him. Did you leave the program better than when you got there, and were you able to elevate a kind of bad program, and he was able to do that?
By the way, Brock Purdy's brother, Chubba Purdy, is a quarterback at Florida State, and his dad, Sean Purdy, was a college baseball player, played a little bit in the minor leagues and kicked around a little bit. So some athletic genes for Brock Purdy. 4-year starter, and his starting days most likely are over. But we will talk about statistically what the 49ers quarterback room is going to look like. The series we're going to do here is over-unders. I think it's very easy when it comes to the quarterbacks, who's going to produce more than they did in 2021 for the 49ers, who's going to produce less in 2021 for the 49ers. But I will let the folks out there know first, before we get into that stuff, about Bet Online. You can bet on some of those numbers. You can bet on some of the things that production-wise, there's tons of NFL futures at Bet Online right now. Production stuff, yardage for players, who's going to lead what, individual sack numbers, individual receiving yards, individual passing yards, of course, Super Bowl futures, and so much more from our partners at Bet Online that continue to be the number one source for all your betting needs and sports information. Find all the latest odds, news, and sports developments, including this year's basketball playoffs, Major League Baseball scores, fights, and even next season's NFL futures. Of course, live betting, playoffs, esports, and more at Bet Online, your continued source for all sports wagering and information. So get in on all that action. Head over to the website today, desktop or mobile device, to learn more about the trends at Bet Online, where the game starts. All right. Thanks, everybody, once again for making Locked On 49ers your first listen every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. For your second listen, check out Locked On Sports Today podcast, the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day, available on Odyssey, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Croc, let's talk quarterback. Let's talk about the 49ers quarterback room. And going through the 2021 statistics, obviously, Jimmy Garoppolo, starting 15 games, had the biggest production for the 49ers. He threw for 3,810 yards, 20 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. Over under on Jimmy Garoppolo starting 15 games and throwing for 3,800 yards again this year, even if it's not for the 49ers.
Is that what his over-under is right now?
No, that's what I'm just doing over-unders on what they did last year. So
okay.
Better than last year or worse than last year. And so look, if Jimmy goes somewhere, he could surpass that. He could start 17 games for somebody. I just don't think he's going to start 17 games or even 15 games for the 49ers. So there's 2 different questions. One, it's pretty easy for us to say he's going to be under that, any of those, stat lines for the 49ers, but could he go somewhere else and still produce that?
Right. Well, I think the biggest question right now for him is, okay, he goes somewhere else. Where does he go? Where does he go? Where he's going to step in day one? What does a team have to see in the quarterbacks that they currently have? That's like, you know what, Jimmy Garoppolo right now, coming off of maybe only being able to have a few weeks with the team before their season starts, and he's the guy, and he's going to lead this team. I definitely think that's a possibility. I respect Garoppolo, and I think he plays very well. It's just right now it's really hard to see who that team is. I feel like if he were to be released tomorrow, he would get picked up immediately. And I think the team that picks him up, I do believe he will become the starter. So I'm still going to go a little underneath on the yardage, but not by much. I think he's going to go somewhere and he'll start the whole year.
Yeah, and who knows? Maybe if he doesn't get hurt, and we know Jimmy Garoppolo, it's hard to say that about him, but maybe he starts 17 games instead of 15 games. And you're right. If Jimmy Garoppolo got released tomorrow and signed with or traded, he ended up with the Seahawks, he for sure wins that job, right? He's going to win the job over Drew Lock. If he ends up in Carolina, he's going to win the job over a rookie who's and Matt Corral, I think, is at his high end would just become Garoppolo anyway. That's kind of what you're hoping he could become.
Right.
And so
a little bit more athletic, but yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but here, and this is what we've talked about this before. We talked about with Purdy too, because you look at some of the things he does, you're like, okay, he can move around a little bit. He can throw the ball a little bit. He can make the throws. Like what you see in college, everything plays down when you get into the NFL. I'm knocking my mic around. Like Jimmy Garoppolo, because I remember clear as day, because I love Jimmy G coming out of college. And it was like, oh, dude, this guy's got a great arm. Not just good. It's like, this guy can sling it. He's got the quickest release I've ever seen. He's athletic. He's pretty big, built like a linebacker. He can move around a little bit. All this stuff you see him in the NFL, and you're like, his arm's okay. And it happens with athletes too. You see a guy, oh, this guy's fast. He's big and fast. They look big and fast in college. And they're like, oh, they're just kind of 6 feet, mid 4.4s. Everybody's 6 feet and runs mid 4.4s in the NFL, right? And so it's like they get on the field, like, this guy looked huge in college. Now he just looks like a regular old dude. So I think there's a lot of that happens in the NFL. I say that is Matt Corral is one of those, because a lot of people talk about Matt Corral like, oh, really athletic, can do all this stuff and make all these throws. I'm like, dude, that's not going to look the same. When he gets in the NFL, this guy's going to look like somebody's little brother got on the field.
It won't look the same. I get what you're saying. It won't look the same. But we are talking about somebody. I mean, he had like 180 rushing yards in one game. So, like, I get what you're saying in the sense of, like, yeah, he go to the NFL. He ain't getting 180 rushing yards in a game. But that is still a different athleticism than what we've seen from Garoppolo. And I'm talking about early Garoppolo. Like, some of the things you were saying, too, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. Watching Brock Purdy and how he was able to move around. I'm like, man, it looks like Jimmy G, pre-injury, being able to just move a little better. Like, you're not going to outrun anyone. You're not going to beat guys to the edge, but you can just use your legs a little better, right? And then it's like, oh, well, what would that look like with Jimmy playing in the Big 12? Would he look more athletic than what we're seing from Brock Purdy right now? So I get what you're saying, but,
yeah.
Even then, here's the tough thing with Jimmy Garoppolo. We talking about him going in and just outright winning a quarterback job. And I think, for us, we view him in a different light because we actually like watch him playing the games. But for him to go to a new team, the biggest question mark will be how will he practice? Because with the 49ers, he was not a good practice player. So I think the team would just have to lean on the fact that, oh, well, he's just going to play better in the games. Because the Jimmy I saw in practice was not – it was never great. Like, I never walked away from any 49ers training camp practice and being like, whew, that Jimmy G was dealing today. That never crossed my mind. Then you hear the reports of, 5 consecutive interceptions in one practice. I get this practice, but like 5 straight picks. Like, those are things where I feel like unless the team is just all in on you, it'll be a little difficult for you to win a quarterback job against even a guy like Drew Lock, who it just looks different. Like, he's probably able to do a little bit more special things where guys are like, man, shoot, Drew Lock is better. Now you get in the game, now the results of the game are probably better for Jimmy Garoppolo than Drew Lock, but you just have to get to that point. So that's one big thing there. Jimmy's not the best practice player.
And when things are clean and you're in practice, someone like Drew Lock, who's got a nice arm, maybe Sam Darnold, they could look okay in practice, and it's not such a slam dunk unless Jimmy. And I think a lot of it is Jimmy knowing where he needs to go with the ball. and getting the ball out quickly and in time and some of those things. And so maybe even if you're not wowing them, I think just the fact that you made the right choice and you went somewhere quickly with the ball could maybe, help him even in that same regard. But clearly we got to go under on Jimmy G's production from last year, whether it's with the 49ers or with somebody else, because there's no clear path for him right now. It's really up in the air.
And you see a lot of the run after catch that he picks up by having Deebo Samuel and George Kittle. I mean, those are two of the better guys at their position group. Will he go to a team that has guys that's able to kind of, I don't want to say carry him as much, but, in the NFC Championship game, he threw a screen yard and Deebo took it, 50 yards to the crib. In the Bears game, he threw a screen pass and Deebo took it 80 yards on 3rd and 20. Will he have someone that will help? I don't want to say inflate his numbers, but just create, that player create the explosive plays for the quarterback. So I would say he probably takes a step back in that as well, which will ultimately let his numbers kind of go down a little bit.
And will he get on a team with a good defense and a good running game that allows him to get the ball back if he does make a mistake and win that way, complementary type of football? Because if he ends up with a bad team that's just bad, I could see things going pretty south for Jimmy as well, and not having the full offseason.
Sounds like you think Jimmy Garoppolo sucks, but I'm not. I'm just trying to put two and two together.
No, I'm saying he's one of 32. He's going to win a starting job somewhere. I think he is. It's just not going to be with the 49ers. And will it be for 15 or more games? He could go somewhere that throws the ball more too and runs less and just and have worse efficiency but put up better numbers.
Will he be more efficient in a? Cause okay, so here's the thing, and I know we're kind of going long here, but Jimmy, think about him in an offense that's just more wide open, right? And what I mean by wide open, I mean just you got 4 receivers out there, and it's a little bit easier to read because one thing about Kyle's offense, and I was talking to someone about this, to me, the way I view Kyle Shanahan's offense is hard. I feel like you have to be so precise and everything is scheme. Everything is scheme. Aside from a screenplay. So aside from a screenplay where you dump it off to Deebo, everything is based on how he draws it up to attack a defense a certain way, as opposed to, this cornerback out here is 8 yards off. I'm just going to go out here and throw the ball to my receiver right now and let him pick up 6 yards, right? Kyle doesn't do those things. So I think it actually makes it a little bit more difficult to have the gimmies unless he draws it up that way. So there is an element where he goes to an offense and it's just a little bit more wide open where he's like, this is easier from the standpoint of me just being able to get the ball into a receiver's hands. How many times did you watch 49ers receivers run a curl route? How many stop routes did you see? I feel like everything, it was just a little more difficult, but it's designed for these big chunk plays. So when you hit it, it's great, but it's just watching it. I feel like you just have to be so precise with your timing, with your accuracy. It's a little difficult to me from the quarterback standpoint. But again, if you're good when you're on, it's very productive, obviously.
Yeah, and that's what I've talked about with Garoppolo is I've talked to other podcasters and other hosts on the network who thought that maybe their team would bring in Jimmy G, and it's what is Jimmy G's thing? And it's aggressively intermediate is sort of that's what the passing game was with Jimmy G. There wasn't a lot of easy check down stuff. You could pad that very easily, right? And there wasn't a lot of down the field stuff. Everything was really condensed, aggressively intermediate. He was forcing it if he had to. He know where that dig was coming behind somebody, linebacker here, safety here, and that's why he'd throw a lot of interceptions too. So you could spread that out, make it easier, more dump off throws, more to your running back. And Kyle Shanahan doesn't throw the ball a lot to his running back. He doesn't give his quarterbacks a lot of easy way outs, and so I think that's part of it. And I think you can even see Jimmy get better with another offense potentially. Something's closer to what he was running in New England.
I have one more question, but I'll wait.
Okay. Yeah. We got to get moving on to the next subject because we talk about Nate Sudfeld, over under 0 statistics, and of course Trey Lance going into year 2 as the starter. What could that look like? And I think we already know whether or not Trey Lance is going to outproduce what he did last year. But could Trey Lance outproduce what Jimmy G did last year? That is coming up right now. And there's no ads to read right now, so let's just jump right into that. Let's go with I was getting all prepared to tell people about Built Bars or whatever. So let's and by the way, good friends at Built Bars. They didn't buy a spot here, but go buy some Built Bars. The new brown. Did you get the brownie batter puffs yet?
Oh man, I just ordered. By the time I get back to California, right now, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see like that's not Eric's setup. Like, and I'm at my grandparents' house. See, it's a little more old school. But I just ordered the brownie batter. I ordered the what puffs were. They don't have the birthday cake anymore. I was very disappointed to see that. I got the granola bar. It's one that they just dropped, that they just came out with. I spent about $80 or so, but got a few boxes coming my way, so I'm excited about that.
Oh, you're going to be powered up for a while there. How about Nate Sudfeld? Over under 0 passing yard. Actually, before we get to Nate Sudfeld, how about this? Deebo Samuel, over under 50% completion, 1 completion on 2 attempts with a touchdown pass. 24 yards. Over under for Deebo's passing.
I'm going to
go over. I think Deebo's going to throw more. Over? He'll throw for over 24 yards this year.
Week 18, you're going to be like, all right, Deebo, can I get that one pass?
Yeah.
Like, gosh, we haven't pulled it out. I think this is the game, right? I'm going to go with the under.
Okay. I'm going to go over on Nate Sudfeld just because if he is QB2, whatever, if Trey Lance, tries to truck people, hurts himself, he might get in and at least throw a little bit. So he'll go over, not really playing at all for the 49ers last year. Trey Lance last year had 603 passing yards, 5 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. He completed 41 of 71, and he's going to be the starter, right? So he's going way over that, 57.7% completion. We're talking more about just like the counting stats and the yardage really here. So 603 yards. Trey Lance is blowing that out of the water, right, Croc?
Yeah. Is he blowing out Jimmy's numbers, though? Like that's the question.
Yeah, so Jimmy Garoppolo, again, he was 68% passer. The big one we're looking at here is just, raw yardage. So 3,810 yards, 3,800 yards. Croc, let me go through this real quick. Did you know? Can you guess where Jimmy Garoppolo's 3,810 passing yards from 2021 rank all time in yardage for a 49ers passer in 49ers history?
Ooh. And real quick before I answer that, he also missed 2.5 games. So
yeah, that was 15 starts.
Yeah, but gosh, and it's kind of cheating because most of the guys you're talking about as far as quarterback, like, in a normal season, I mean, obviously last season they opened it up to 17 games played instead of 16. So he kind of historically only missed 1 game. Okay, right. But anyways, I would say 3rd. No, because he's 2nd. Yeah, he was 2nd to Jeff Garcia, right? Jeff Garcia threw for a little bit over 4,000 yards. And I know Jimmy was close to that in 2019, but did not surpass it. He didn't throw for 4,000, but he was like a few yards short.
You're close.
We're talking about 38. I would say 4th.
There's a couple of – let me pull it back up. There's a couple of Steve Young 4,000-yard seasons in there. So you're right. Jeff Garcia's number 1, 4,278 in 2000. A couple of years before that, Steve Young had the record for the franchise with 4,170 yards. Way back in 1993, Steve Young had 4,023 yards, which was absurd for 1993 in the 49ers. That was the first ever 4,000-yard passing season for a 49ers quarterback in 1993. Only 3 times have 49ers quarterbacks thrown over 4,000 yards. Jimmy G is 4th in 2019 with 3,978. He was just shy. Then another Steve Young season, a couple of Joe Montana's. Joe Montana's best season was 3,944 in 1990. In 83, he had 3,910. And then number 8. So Jimmy Garoppolo's 2021. And a lot of fans think it was just a god-awful season. That's the 8th best passing yardage season in 49ers history in 15 games.
It's a different game, though, man. I mean, obviously, right? I mean, quarterbacks, where was his yardage in the sense of all the quarterbacks last season? Because I feel like 4,000 yards, I mean, you're having 10 quarterbacks a year, if not more, throw for 4,000 yards in the season.
Yeah, and there's some other franchises. I just saw the Chicago Bears, I think, have either 0 or 1 all-time 4,000-yard passers, and their all-time leader for a season is Eric Kramer in like 1995. And so some franchises,
not even color, huh?
No, not even color. So some franchises have had some troubles. Like 4,000 is a pretty big number, but that number is getting smaller and smaller as we go. And some franchises have done it a bunch of times. And surprisingly, with Hall of Fame quarterbacks, the 49ers really haven't with the high-end production. And that's what's crazy with Trey Lance. If he has based on now modern era stats, if he has a pretty good season, he could break 49ers records. Be like, he could in year 2, his first year as a starter, be like, he just broke all the 49ers single season records. And like that is a possibility for Trey Lance if he goes over what Jimmy Garoppolo did last year. If he plays 17 games, can he go over 3,800 yards? I think he could, because the 49ers weren't even that pass heavy of a team last year. Jimmy Garoppolo completed 301 of 441 pass attempts, but I want to go to a statistic I just saw yesterday really quick, and then we'll answer the question if Trey Lance is going to go over or under Jimmy G's 3,800 yards in 2022. So early down pass rate in the second half of 2021, the 49ers were the second lowest in early down pass frequency, which means they ran the ball second most on early downs in the second half of last year. Only the Patriots ran the ball more on early downs last year versus the rest of the league. And so, and it feels like the 49ers are preparing to run the ball even more, or be more like the second half 49ers than they were in the first half. And they won a lot more games in the second half too, right? So I think they're going to force the issue running the ball. So this might not be the season that Trey Lance breaks any of those records, but I think at some point, if Trey Lance is the starter for a few years, he's going to go over 4,000, and he's probably going to set the record and surpass Jeff Garcia's 4278 if he's a pretty good quarterback under Kyle Shanahan. I just don't know if it's going to be this year, because it feels like the 49ers are setting up to be extremely run heavy, although it's going to be really hard for them to be even more run heavy than they were last year in the second half of the season, when they were the second most run heavy team in the NFL, especially on early downs.
Well, I'm looking at some stats here, and you talk about, a quarterback kind of getting better and eventually like kind of improving on his numbers, especially like yardage in the season. And Dak Prescott, year 1 as a rookie, he threw for 3,600 yards, 23 touchdowns to only 4 interceptions, which was really a great rookie year. But then the next year, he kind of had a drop off, 3,300 yards. Then 2018, 3,800 yards. And then 2019, he just took off passing yardage wise, which was 4,900 yards and 30 touchdowns, which would be up there with all 49ers like historical numbers. So, and then last year as well, when he played a full season, 4,400 yards, 37 touchdowns. So we see the evolution of Dak Prescott and how, they look to kind of build on his passing and maybe what they handed to him again early on. His first 3 years, all shy of 4,000 yards. And then the last 2 full seasons, almost 4,500 yards or more in each season, almost 5,000 yards in 2019. So you just see kind of, maybe you'd expect that type of leaning on the passing game from Trey Lance, where, early on, maybe it is more of a 3,600 yard season.
And that was 3,600 was the first Dak full starting year was 3,600. That was his rookie year, right?
Yeah, that was his rookie season.
I think that's a good comp.
Now,
and we've talked a lot about Josh Allen, and there's, you could dare to dream how good Trey Lance could be. And I think physically he's more impressive than Dak Prescott, but Dak Prescott's a really good quarterback. And I don't think you should be disappointed in those year 1 Dak Prescott numbers. I think Dak Prescott's a really good comp for Trey Lance and where he might end up being as a player. And he could surpass that, but that would be really good if he's, I don't want to say just Dak Prescott, but like that would be awesome for Trey Lance to be that, especially early in his career.
Early on, I mean, especially year 2, it was like, can this guy throw the football? Like, it looked crazy. And I watched all the Dallas Cowboy games because my brother's a big Cowboy fan. I hate them, so I watched them just to hate on them and kind of poke fun. In that second year, I think Prescott, half the games he didn't even throw for 200 yards that season. And it just looked so weird. And there's like one hopping passes. I mean, they weren't able to lean on the run game as much because Ezekiel Elliott missed like 7 games or something like that because of the weird little incidents he was involved in. So it looked drastically different, but you see where he was then to the passer that he is now. And that just kind of shows the growth over the years and how you kind of have to be a little patient sometimes with the development of these guys in the passers. Dak Prescott now, he's heading into year 7. And, now I think they're comfortable with however he has to win the game. But sometimes it kind of takes a little while to kind of build up to that. Remember, I mean, when he broke his ankle or whatever, then they ended up giving him a big contract. Well, he had to play on a franchise tag because they weren't 100% sold that he was going to be their guy and didn't want to have to pay him a certain amount of money. So I could see something like that with Trey Lance where, early on he has to figure it out. Now, if if you extrapolate his numbers, and I kind of cheated a little bit when I originally did this math because I included his, he came in for a play and threw a touchdown, or, but if you kind of extrapolate his numbers over a 2.5 game kind of start, he throws for like 4,100 yards in a season and like 30-something touchdowns. Now, again, I don't foresee him doing that in a game, but if you were to say, he's throwing for 250 yards a game, and I don't know what that adds up, what that is over a full season, I could see that 250 yards a game and 2 touchdowns. Like I don't think that'd be like like, oh my gosh, like I'm so shocked at what he's doing. Like, no, I can see that because of the explosive plays. Now, even if they lean on the run game a little bit more, but he still has just more explosive plays. He averaged 10 yards per attempt in one game. I think we could see him throw for a decent amount of yards. You're muted.
I'm muted there. Okay. To have 4,000 yards passing in 17 games, you only have to throw for about 235 yards per game. And that's why it's happening so much, especially with 17 games. And last year in those 2 starts, even with the really run heavy, and he didn't even throw the ball a lot against the Texans either. He only had 23 pass attempts. He was averaging 220 yards per game. So he was pretty close, even with the usage that I'm sure will go up as far as, how he's throwing the ball. He's not going to, I don't think he's going to be running the ball 16 times every game like he did against the Cardinals in his first start. So if you look at that, even what he did last year, it's 37-48. If he averaged what he averaged in just his 2 starts, not even adding in the other stuff where he came in for a player or so, he would be pretty darn close to Jimmy G. He'd be, with one shot over the top of Jimmy G just with that. So I almost want to say
probably a few more rushing touchdowns as well.
Yeah, a little bit more rushing production. So I want to kind of go over. I think he could hit it. He absolutely could, which would put him top 10 immediately in 49ers history for passing yards, which is kind of crazy with all the quarterbacks and all the seasons the 49ers have had. But I'm going to say under. I'm going to say under. I think they're going to be run heavy. You don't know if he's going to end up playing all 17 games. You hope he stays healthy. But I'm going to say under on Jimmy G's 3,800 yards, but he absolutely could go over, and he's going to blow away his rookie production.
And I'll go over on his
yardage. There you go. There you have it. 49ers quarterback room. Very interesting right now. We'll see how many they take to training camp. If it's going to be all 4 guys, I have a feeling it's going to be 3. And we'll see what happens with Nate Sudfeld backing up Trey Lance. And can Brock Purdy make the 49ers, or is he destined to the practice squad? Thanks, everybody, for listening. Thanks for making us your first listen every day here on Locked On 49ers. We're going to continue going through all of those position groups, over-under versus production. Last year for these 2022 49ers, we're going to look back 3 years from the draft. Go back and look at the 2019 draft. They say it takes 3 years to grade a draft. So let's go back 3 years and grade the 49ers draft. And of course, we're going to do an all-time draft on Wednesdays in June with Mr. Nick Winkler, a 3-way all-time 49ers draft. Will Jimmy G or Trey Lance get drafted in that? That'll be interesting with a 3rd team in the mix with me, Croc, and Winkler. All of that coming up in future episodes of Locked On 49ers. We will talk to you then.